Hi, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Voices Beneath the Waves. My name is Stephanie Miele, and I'm your host this evening. And I have the pleasure of interviewing Karen Gowlett-Holmes. She is, her career is in research, her achievements are in diving, photography, and marine biology. She is an exciting individual that has done many, many amazing things. So please welcome Karen.
Thank you.
Hey, Karen.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining us.
It's a real pleasure and honor.
So I wanted to talk about all of the achievements but I want to take it back to your childhood and how all of this began, so we can kind of create the picture for the audience of how you got your start. So first of all, you're calling in from Australia?
Yes, I'm calling from Tasmania.
So you are 14 hours, I think, ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So it's your morning,
Yes.
my evening.
Yes, it is.
So I wanted to talk about your love of the ocean beginning during childhood fishing trips with your father after migrating to Australia. Talk to me about that. How did that all come to be?
Well, I've been fishing with my father when we were in England. And then when we migrated to Australia and I was 6, we just kept it up. And we would go out and we would collect fish bait, which I thought was wonderful because there was all these very interesting things poking around in the shallows, in the sand and that. And then we'd go fishing. And so I used to spend most weekends on the foreshore, poking around in the shallows and just observing all these fascinating things. So that was sort of the start of it, and it just developed from there. I learned to swim and started snorkeling, and then when I was barely 15, I learned to scuba dive, and it was a real enlightenment going underwater and being able to see these things close up for the first time.
That's amazing. And it must obviously very different from the fishing in England and being in the Southern Hemisphere with a brand new set of species of fish. It's got to be an amazing bonding point for you and your father.
Oh, yes, we were very close all of his life. And it was something that we always did, was go fishing and spend some time together.
So where did you draw your inspiration from when it came to exploring a career path in marine biology, photography, and diving? Was there one passion point, or one person or thing that you wanted to follow? What was the impetus for that?
It was something that I just had this total fascination initially with seashells and mollusks in general. And then it just developed into marine life, looking at that. There wasn't anybody around, because in those days there wasn't very many role models, particularly for women. But it was something I was really interested in, and I pursued it despite having obstacles put in my way. And I just decided that was what I was interested in, and that was what I was going to do. Through university, you know, it was things like we were told, oh, we're going in the field and the boys might like to bring their diving equipment. And the girls were considered just to sit on the shore and do nothing. And one of the boys put their hands up and said, well, Karen's the most experienced diver in the group. So it was something that I pursued single-mindedly, I think. And it was just that interest in marine life that got me into diving and also into photography. Because one of the things that being underwater in those days, of course, there wasn't the digital cameras that we have now. So you had to photograph things on film, and it was not easy to record what the living colors and activities and habitats and everything were. So being able to take underwater photographs was a way of recording those colors and habitats of the species, because my main interest is invertebrates, not fish. And many of those are soft and gelatinous, and all their features and forms and colors are lost once you take them out of the water and preserve them. So the photography was developed from that, of just being able to, diving was to get me where I wanted to be, and photography was to be able to record what I was seeing. And that was the inspiration for it.
That's pretty amazing. So talk me through university. Where did you end up going to university?
I went to the University of Adelaide, which does have a reasonably strong marine biology bent to it. I did a general science degree, a Bachelor of Science, and there were certain marine topics. I did marine botany with Professor Womersley, who was a leading algologist, and I did several marine ecology units and that. But I had a very general grounding in biology and sedimentary geology, which have been great and introduction, because instead of focusing on the marine side very closely from the start, I had a very general, broad background. And the sedimentary geology was very useful for understanding sediments and rock types and rock formation and sediment formation, and how the species interact with those, with a lot of the invertebrates are burrowing in a very specific sediment requirements. So this was very useful for me in my later career.
The invertebrates that you love to study, is there one that you're mainly drawn to, or is it several species? And or I guess the follow-up question to that would be, is that what you love to photograph underwater as well?
Yes, I'm very much an invertebrate nut, and that's where I sort of photograph that. The fish I tend to photograph tend to be more the benthic fish that sit still. So they're sort of invertebrates in a way, because they don't do much, not like a normal fish that's swimming around. Things like anglerfish and handfish and things like that. But the invertebrates are what draws me. That's what my main interest is. The group I primarily love are chitons, which are a group of mollusks. But our marine fauna is very poorly known in southern Australia. So I've had this sort of very general interest in trying to record as much biodiversity as possible. So the samples I would take, I would photograph things alive and collect the individual samples, which would then be preserved in the South Australian Museum as a permanent collection with the photograph. So this meant that we had this, and then we could disperse that to the researchers who were working on the various groups. So they would have the specimens, they would have the photographs of a lot of very valuable information, and then they would be able to describe those. Less than 30% of the species in the southern Australian waters are actually described. So it's a very poorly known fauna. And this meant that we were discovering new species all the time. I've discovered thousands of new species in my work over the years, and hundreds of them have actually been described. I've actually had 13 of them named after me.
That was actually my next question. So to have a species named after you is pretty amazing. So is there a favorite name or species that you sorry, I'm excited about this, as you can tell. How did you come up with the names of the species? Were you allowed to name them?
No, I have described species, but the ones that were named after me were described by other people in recognition of the work that I'd done. And because I work across such a wide range of invertebrate groups, although I have had a couple of chitons named after me, I've had everything from polychaete worms, sea pens, parasitic leeches, bryozoans, ascidians, all sorts of things. Probably my favorite is a deep sea pen. It's what's called a rock pen, and it is found in the deep sea. So it's over 1,000 meters deep, and they live on rocky outcrops. Sea pens normally live in sediments, but these particular ones have the bulb that normally anchors them in the sand modified into a suction cup so that it sticks onto the rock. This thing's about 1 meter high.
Wow.
We had seen them in photographs that we had of the deep sea reefs, and when we were able to, we had Jason, the submersible, down here, and while it was here we were able to collect some samples And unbeknown to me, the people who were working on it decided to name the species after me and didn't tell me till it was actually published. So that was pretty good.
That's really neat.
So it's been there's been a lot of species I've sort of handed over. A lot of the species I found have been handed over to the various experts, and they'll describe them, sometimes tens at a time in a paper, and then there'll be another one named after me will pop up in that group.
That, I bet that doesn't get old. That's really special to be able to photograph, to study, and then to discover, and then have it named after you is pretty special.
It is. It's very. The other one that's a really good one is a little colonial anemone, a zoanthid anemone, which is bright yellow, and it's an extremely common species in southern Australia, but it was only described about 10 years ago.
Really?
And they named that one after me, and so that's really a coup, because everybody sees it, and it's often in incredibly large numbers. So you'll see whole walls covered with these yellow zoanthids.
It's it sounds like you've done an amazing amount of photography, research, studying. You've had more than 25 years in scientific research. From the fact gathering I did of you, more than 40 scientific papers, books, articles to your name. How do you balance the technical side of scientific documentation? Because there's obviously something that has to be done when you're documenting these species, with sharing that knowledge so that it's accessible to the public. Did you find, how did that work? The rigors of the scientific documentation, and then sharing that knowledge with the public. What does that look like?
Well, the photographs I take, which are scientific photographs, are also beautiful. So we have a lot of things. You take a photograph and people will look at that picture and go, wow, look at the forms, the colors, look at the animals in that. And we have an issue with the marine environment generally, and this is not just in Australia, that it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Mm-hmm. And so although with the recent years, with the number of documentaries and being able to take digital photographs and video underwater, that's expanded in the knowledge of the general public, it's still nowhere near what we have for the coverage on land, or comparing the tropics to the temperate water areas. So from my very early time, even at university, I would literally go out and give talks to schools and community groups within those days, photographic slides, just to show them what we had here and what was underwater that they couldn't see. And people would be just blown away with the colors, and they would start to relate to the fact that we have these beautiful things around, and they would say, well, yes, the marine environment is worth protecting. And we've seen generational changes in attitudes towards the sea over my lifetime. And thankfully, we're now getting to the point where people are much more aware of what's there. But even now, I'll give talks to local groups and schools and things, and people still come away saying, wow, I didn't know that we have this here. We thought that would be in the tropics on the Great Barrier Reef, but we have that in Tasmania in the cold water. And they go, wow, yes, this is really important. And that's the way to try and get it out, to share with the public, putting it into the popular scientific, or the popular things like Australian Geographic, diving magazines, getting it out there where it can be seen in books that are used in schools, in textbooks and things. And this means that we can actually get that information out there and distribute that as much as possible. The scientific specimens I collected are all in museums, and this means that they're permanently maintained in those collections linked to the photographs. And this is not just the ones I collected personally diving, but also a lot of the deep sea work that I did with CSIRO. All of those specimens and the photographs are in the museums as permanent collections. So long after I'm gone, they will still be worked on by people. And there's many specimens that have never been worked on yet because we simply don't have the expertise available at the moment. We will get people in the future who will work on those. And even now I see things that I collected 50 years ago being published and described, which is a wonderful feeling because the knowing that that's still there, it's still being worked up, it's still being produced, and people are still getting a tremendous amount of information out of that. And now with what's going online, you can get a lot of more information about what's around online as well, which is a great way to go.
It's an amazing legacy for you to leave behind. I guess speaking of the legacy and these species being described and documented, is there anything that you want to be remembered by when people reflect back and talk about Karen and all of the things that she has done? What would you like people to remember you as or by?
I hope that people will remember me for the fact that I tried to get as much of this information out and expand the knowledge and help as many of our younger people who are coming through as possible to get into the field and to enjoy it. It's a great thing to go out, and even now I'll still go out and find new things, see new behaviors, and that gives me a real sort of thrill to do that and to see younger people coming through and enjoying it as well and discovering new things, still finding new things. That's great to see that. And if I can be remembered as facilitating that, that will be a tremendous legacy, I think, to leave behind.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of the younger generation, I wanted to point out that you've been recognized as a master of photography by the Australian Institute of Professional Photography and nominated for the Eureka Award for Scientific Journalism. Young people are watching this and will watch this interview. Is there anything you would like to impart on them to help inspire them to go for their dreams? Is there any words of wisdom that you have for the younger generation that's thinking of maybe exploring a career in photography or scientific research? Any sage advice?
The best thing I can say is if you're interested in that and you enjoy that, give it a go. When I came through, there was a lot of discrimination of the fact that women can't do this. And that although that's less now, it's still there. So particularly for young women coming through, don't put off for saying that's not a thing that girls do. That's definitely not the case. Do things that you enjoy. Go out there and get a thrill from it. Don't believe that everything is known. We know only a fraction of what's there. We know only a fraction, even the ones we can put a name on. Most of the time we don't know what they do, what they eat, where they live. So there's still a huge range of studies that could be done. And as far as photography goes, even though it's now a lot simpler and easier to do with the digital revolution, it also gives you a lot more ability to be able to take a range of photographs. And to be a good scientific photograph doesn't mean that it's not a beautiful photograph. And this is the thing, you can take beautiful photographs that can be incredibly valuable scientifically. And having beautiful photographs out there so people go, oh, wow, that's just a wonderful thing. You then enhance, the next thing they'll think of is, I want to protect that. I want to make sure that continues. I want my children to be able to see that. And that's the sort of thing that you need to go for. So don't get put off by people saying, oh, no, girls don't do that, or people don't do that, or we know everything about that. That's not the case. There's still huge realms of information that we need to know. And you can get a decent career in these things, as long as we can continue with the funding from funding bodies to make positions available to continue work in these areas.
That's some very, very good advice. In 2024, the film Reviving giants, which highlights the efforts to save Tasmania's giant kelp forests. I've always been fascinated by kelp forests. They're gorgeous. Can you share what inspired this quest to restore these habitats? What was behind that?
When I first moved to Tasmania in the mid-90s, there was kelp forest everywhere along this coast. And if you'd have told me then that in 10 years' time that we'd have none left, I'd have just laughed at you. It was such a huge and iconic environment. But what we saw was over the next 10 years, the minimum winter water temperature, which is the critical one here, has increased by 20%. And this has taken the kelp from growing healthily for 9 months of the year and sort of subsisting for 3 months during the warmer weather, to having barely 3 or 4 months each year where it's cold enough for it to really grow well, and the rest of the time it's just surviving. And combined with that, we had a lack of reduction in rainfall, a reduction in upwelling of the Antarctic bottom water, so we're getting less nutrient coming into the water, and a movement of warmer water species, invasive species coming down from the north with the East Australian current. So we end up with a long-spined sea urchin here. And sea urchins are keystone species, and this one's got no local predators. So it just causes devastating destruction to reef communities. So the whole combination of it was that the kelp forest really came under pressure. By 2015, 2016 summer season, it was wiped out. And we had no kelp forest left along this coast. And we're sort of sitting there thinking, there's this iconic community, incredibly important community that's gone. A friend of ours who's a marine botanist was involved in a program of actually producing juvenile kelp plants for planting out in other areas to do with aquaculture. And he had some spares. And he said to us, do you want to give it a go? Putting them out there, see if we can grow them. So this is what we did. And with my business partner, Mick Barron, who's also a biologist, we decided we would have a go. We tied little strings with baby plants onto bricks, and we put them out on the reef, and they grew. So we showed that it was actually possible to do it. The problem was that they'd grow, and kelp have a lot of flotation with them as they grow. And the kelp plants would get to the point where they would have so much flotation, they'd lift their brick and float off with it. So we had to try and figure out how to attach them to the reef to make sure that the plants actually attached to the reef. And this is where the University of Tasmania got involved, because we'd actually proven that the concept was viable. We can plant these things out and they will grow. What we needed to develop was the method to do it. So that the university got involved at this point about actually trying a number of different methods of attaching the little strings of baby plants to the reef, and going through qualitative and quantitative testing of what techniques work the best. And they developed the kelp grafting, actually grafting it onto the holdfast of competing kelp species, which are trimmed back, and the strings are tied securely around the base of the holdfast, and then the baby kelp plants then attach to the holdfast and then to the rock. And we've had tremendous success with this. We know that it's not going to be a fact that we can just go out, plant them, and walk away, because the conditions are not ideal for the plants anymore. So we do things like going out and doing urchin culls to try and eliminate sea urchins in the patches that we're planting. We go out and do gardening, where we remove competing kelp plants and allow juvenile, and we are getting self-setting juvenile plants coming off of the plants that we've put out there. They get under the competing kelps and then they just go dormant, which is a normal part of their life cycle. So we then remove some of the competing kelps and allow the young plants to grow up. We actually have areas now where we've got tens of square meters of giant kelp forest regenerated with plants over 15 meters tall.
Wow.
Kelp will grow very fast. See, kelp under ideal conditions will grow 60 centimeters a day. That's 2 feet a day.
Wow.
So,
have you?
So if you can give it the conditions, it goes. So we what we're hoping we can do, and it won't be something that we'll see in our lifetimes, but the up and coming generations, we have a lot of young people involved in the planting out and that. The hope is that we can maintain some areas of kelp forest. And if we are able to turn around the climate conditions to the point where it improves for the giant kelp, there will be this basis there that can then spread out naturally, because they're already showing natural regeneration in these areas. So those plants will be there ready and waiting to be able to expand out to fill up some of the niche that they've lost.
That's really, really fascinating to see something that was devastated and now there's bits and pieces of regrowth. Have you noticed when you go to do some of the gardening or culling of different species, have you noticed other species coming in because the giant kelp are starting to come back, or is it too soon?
It's too soon yet to get anything that's really quantitative on that, but there's, we're seeing things come in and live there because they prefer to live in the heavily shaded and protected environment. Kelp has the ability to reduce the effects of wave action because it acts as a dampener on the swell. So we get species that prefer those calmer waters. We also get the species that prefer the shade, and the canopy of the kelp casts a lot of shade. So there's actual other algal species which prefer to live under that shaded canopy, which don't do as well with some of the other kelps because the competing kelps are all quite low to the bottom and scrape along the bottom with the fronds, whereas giant kelp, because it floats up high, that actually doesn't affect the bottom in that regard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you still?
One of the other things that one of the major commercial species in the area, which is rock lobsters, they actually get a 20% increase in recruitment in kelp forest compared with other areas. So this is it has impacts even for the commercial fisheries as well, the fact that we get this better recruitment. And of course, small fish can shelter amongst the kelp in that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're still actively working with the kelp. How are you? What are you dividing your time with? The kelp? Are you still doing your photography actively? Like, what does your days look like now for interests?
Unfortunately, I've not been able to get in the water for a couple of years because I was badly affected. I had COVID twice, and I ended up with asthma and a few other effects. And I had long COVID. So it's only been in the last 6 months that I've actually got on top of it and hopefully be able to get back into the water next year. As far as the photography goes, I've still been doing a little bit of intertidal work, but I've not been involved in that as heavily as I was. We've been concentrating very much on the giant kelp. And this morning we actually had a group going out, and we've got another 10 going out tomorrow to do some planting. We're in the middle of, this is the middle of winter here, so we're in the ideal time to be planting out the kelp as much as we can. So that's what we're concentrating on. We've actually run a PADI distinctive specialty course on giant kelp restoration, and it teaches people the actual techniques that we use and all the reasoning behind it. Those divers then have the skills that we can then use to go out and do the planting. We have grant money to pay for all of the diving costs, so it doesn't cost the volunteers anything to do the plant outs. And
that's amazing.
So what we do is once they are trained, we then put a call out. Yes, we've got a boat going out on this day, and we get people ring up. Oh yes, I want to be on that. And so we get groups. We get some people who are there pretty well every time we go out. Other people can only make a day a week or a day a fortnight. But the whole thing is people get out there, get involved, and they get a bit of ownership about what's going on. And they enjoy it, and they learn a lot. And a lot of them are young. We see a lot of students come through doing this, and equally there's people approaching my age who are retired, who are able to get involved because they now no longer have to work, and they can get involved that way as well.
That's amazing. It's because we now live in an age where people can easily and quickly tell one another what they're doing, what they're working on. So it spreads that education piece that we were talking about earlier in the interview about getting the word out there, getting more people excited. So it sounds amazing that you're helping to not only plant the giant kelp, teaching the future generations how to care and plant, and then just kind of putting the quote unquote seeds of knowledge in there. So people of younger, mid, older generations that maybe are finding renewed senses of passions or just trying something new, you seem to have really kind of inspired many, many people to do something good.
Yeah, this year we ran our first in kelp internships, where we had people, young people, mostly international, would come and stay with us for a month, do the kelp course, and then get involved in as much diving on the kelp and planting out and gardening and learning a lot. Also, and the people who did those internships this year absolutely loved it. But they also get to meet the researchers at the University of Tasmania, go to the laboratories where we grow the baby plants out. And we're in a rural area here, so they got to experience Tasmanian wildlife, kangaroos and wallabies and things. So I think everybody really enjoyed it, but we've had people go away not only to other parts of Australia, but we had a people from Sweden, from the US, all over, coming and enjoying it and passing that knowledge on. And although we're specifically looking at giant kelp, there are other areas of the world that have giant kelp and it's in trouble. California, for example.
Yes.
And these methods are also applicable to other species of kelps. So the knowledge that we're sort of developing is being passed on to people, not just within Tasmania, but also within Australia, but also in other parts of the world as well. And hopefully it will inspire them to develop programs that are applicable to their regions too.
Yeah, it's taking that knowledge and adapting it to other various local communities and or species, maybe subspecies that really propel the scientific methodologies forward so that students can partake, more studying can be done, and the education piece that's just so critical. I do have a question though. Are you close to Neil the seal?
We have Neil the seal come in within 20 kilometers of us several times a year. He comes in twice a year, and he was actually born on the Tasman Peninsula, which is where I live. And this year he actually came ashore just down the road from us and sat in the middle of the road. So we had to go over, we drive around and very carefully towing the boat down to the boat ramp, and the local parks and wildlife had to try and push him back off the road so that he could get onto the where he would be safe on the sand. He's a very opinionated seal, and he considers any road surface his, particularly if it's nice and warm. When you're a 1-ton seal, anything you want is yours, basically.
Oh, but, he's a superstar, Karen. I am obsessed with him. I think he is just phenomenal. So the fact that you're close by, you must send me a picture, because I think this fellow is amazing.
Yeah, he's a very popular boy when he comes in. Unfortunately, we get people who try and take selfies with him and get too close. He's a wild seal, and he's an adolescent male. And he's the last time ashore, he's doing what adolescent male elephant seals do. They play spar. So he destroyed a couple of bollards, a fence, and several signposts. They normally have to have the police there to try and get the people to move around. And it's very important that people come and enjoy Neil, but do it with a telephoto lens. Don't get too to him and get him upset. He has a thing about traffic cones. He likes to squash those. But there was a lot of cemented bollards this time that he pushed over completely out of the ground, which is a nice test for an adolescent seal. But in a few years, he's going to be a full-grown elephant seal weighing over 3 tons.
That is a large animal. And the fact that people are getting close to an animal of that size that's testing boundaries, it's kind of lends to survival of the fittest, or
Yep.
Darwin's law, if you will.
Yes.
It's yeah, I had to ask when I saw Tasmania, I'm like, oh, Neil, he's just phenomenal.
Yeah, he's definitely a personality.
Yes. So we're coming up to closing time. So is there anything that you want to impart on the individuals that are either watching this or will watch it? Anything you want to get across with regards to conservation, or anything you want to share before we close out?
I think the main thing when dealing with conservation and climate change and that is everybody can do something. No matter how small it is, it's important. And if we all do small things, they all come together and become a big thing. And I think that's very important for people to realize. Don't get overwhelmed with the fact that it's such a big problem. Do your small bit and do as much as you can. And whatever you do is building on what other people are doing. What I've done with my life and what I've created and discovered in that is the base that everyone coming up now will be working on. And that's what people need to do. Is you're not going to be the be all and end all of things. You're part of the journey and part of the progress. And everybody can contribute to that. It may only be a small bit, may end up being a big bit. But every small bit helps. And that all becomes a big bit. And we can make change. And we can do things. The average person can contribute. We can all work together and we can make a big impact. And that's what I hope people will take from this.
That's really wise and pretty awesome, Karen. Thank you for sharing that. And your journey has been nothing short of amazing. Between the timing where you grew up, where there was a lot of discrimination, and to your point, it's still not gone. But you've been able to see how things have changed a little bit. More women are in the sciences, in the sport, but then taking the passions, you being honored with the Master of Photography, the species being named after you, all of the amazing things, and yet you're still so humble and approachable. I find you fascinating, along with my friend Neil the Seal. So thank you for taking the time to talk to everybody this evening. And I'm going to post links so that people can follow along your journey and just learn a little bit more about what you do, and hopefully be inspired by the way that you've approached things. So thank you, Karen, for taking the time to be with us this evening / your morning.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you. All right, perfect. So thank you everybody for taking the time to tune in tonight. And I wanted to thank Karen again for her time and being here with us. So tune in next month for our next session of Voices Beneath the Waves. Take care. Hey, we're not live.